So on October 29th, 2010, I resigned from GE. At the time, I was a global product leader for PACS in GE Healthcare. Now, the decision to resign from GE was not an easy one or an abrupt one. It actually took me several months of personal courage, a lot of self-reflection before I reached that decision. It all happened a few months before that moment. Take you back in July of 2010, when I received a phone call from my dad. He had bad news for me. And he told me that my mom had collapsed and she was put on ventilators. They live in Pakistan, very remote areas, so I took my first flight out to see my mom. To give you a little context of my parents, they're very educated people. After retirement, they dedicated their lives to volunteering and helping the less fortunate people in very remote areas of Pakistan, helping build infrastructure. Clean water, orphanages, schools, clinics. Once I arrived in Pakistan and I got to the hospital, I see my dad waiting in those waiting area chairs with some family members around him. And when I looked in his eyes, he was lost. I mean, he's a very smart guy, very accomplished. But that moment, what it did to him was just, I cannot forget that face he had, like completely lost eyes. And we needed to make decisions, and doctors were really looking for information like which medications, which my mom had, which doctors she was seeing. It was very problematic. And when I asked my dad where all this information is, he gave me a binder with a bunch of paperwork in it. Now, I'm a big believer in controlling your destiny, but at that time, I felt really helpless. I was very sad and also extremely frustrated, all these emotions at the same time. I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, you're a pretty smart guy. But I commend you for all that you're doing, but you're growing old yourself, you're living in the middle of nowhere, and you have none of this information organized. Well, why are you doing this to yourself? And I clearly remember my dad answering this question with another question that completely transformed my life from that point on. And his question was, Asif, you tell me you live in the most advanced country in the world, the United States. You work for one of the biggest companies in the world, GE, in healthcare. How do you track all this information? Do you remember which medications you took 3 months ago? I was just completely baffled by that question. It made me realize that as advanced as we are in the Western world, in the US, we are really as far back as in the third world, when the right information is not accessible to stakeholders. Lack of information results in delays in decision-making, which actually increases cost of care in the whole scheme of things. So those became my moonshots. Longevity, how do you help people live longer, healthier, while cutting costs or bringing costs down at the same time? After that experience, my mom was doing stable. I came back to US and I started looking at what I was doing at GE. I was trying to build health information exchanges, things like that, which were really not sustainable, at least in my mind. There had to be a different way of solving this problem. So I spent in my network trying to figure out other people who are working on this. And every time I looked around, I really came back to myself. I had a great experience at GE. I knew the problem really well, and for what it's worth, I had an MBA from University of Chicago. So I was like, anybody can do it, I should be the one doing it, and that kind of helped me make that decision. Now, the decision wasn't that easy. For months on leaving GE, I continued to doubt myself whether this is the right decision or not. But one thing that kept me going or stuck to my decision was really this extreme conviction around solving this problem and my long-term commitment to those 2 moonshots that we talked about. The problem, because of my mom's experience, is kind of like consumed me. I believe that the sole purpose of my entire life is to figure this out. I think about this problem day and night, every waking moment. When I'm brushing my teeth or driving my car, it's just there. So it was obvious I made the decision, but how do I go from there to actually executing? There were lots of hurdles in front of me. One of them was convincing my wife. As some of you know, she is a total opposite of me and extremely risk averse. And coming from an Eastern culture, I had to make sure my parents were on board and her parents were on board and then some other family members were on board. So it wasn't easy. Every time I talk to anybody, they all ask me the same question. Asif, you have an amazing career in front of you at GE. Why do you want to throw it all away and start a business with a concept that you have some idea about, but really you don't have it figured out? How do you do that? Why do you want to do that? And it was most of the time, it's pretty simple answer. One was, look, I personally experienced it with my mom, and it's a prolific global problem that needs to be resolved. And I have the experience and the skill set and the knowledge that I should be able to do it. So why shouldn't I? It took me several months before I convinced my wife. We have 2 kids, and my wonderful, handsome GE salary was no longer going to be there. I estimated about a year, but in reality, it actually took 3 years before I got paid. So that was the challenge. But we couldn't do anything about mortgage. We had to pay it, right? But all other expenses we had to cut. So spur of the moment vacations, gone. No more eating out all the time. Live-in nanny, gone. People who help clean and prepare food, gone. We completely transformed our lives to help me move in the direction of what I really believed in. And at that pace, my wife was feeling better too at the same time. Now, 5 years after we first launched our product at Caremerge, I am just so excited and so happy and satisfied that I actually made that switch. We are growing. We're a growth stage company now. We are in over 650 locations nationwide and in Canada. We're growing with leaps and bounds, and it's an amazing, amazing, amazing place. Caremerge has become a leading enterprise wellness and engagement solution for senior living facilities, so your assisted living, memory care, and so on, and it's growing. Earlier this year, as we were celebrating our success and kind of excited about the future being a growth mode, I received another phone call. This time, it was my sister. My mom had been hospitalized again, and everybody was trying to figure out why. 7 years after my dad asked those questions from me was right there in front of me once again. How do you get access to stakeholders so they can make decisions better, faster? Made me realize that something had to be done. All those feelings of helplessness, frustration came all together and just put me back in time. Made me realize that even after 7 years, all the wonderful things that we have accomplished in healthcare, with technology, with wearables, with IoT, artificial intelligence, the list goes on, getting information to the right stakeholders is as crippling as it was before. That problem hasn't solved, at least not as widespread as we need to be. So as of November 3rd, 2017, right about 7 years mark, I stepped away from day-to-day operations at Caremerge. Caremerge, growing, wonderful organization, and I'm embarking on my journey once again that I originally felt so compelled to solve. It's not an easy decision, but as I mentioned earlier, the problem has consumed me, and I believe that is the sole purpose of my life. It's my long-term commitment. One thing that's different now than before is I have a success story behind me in the form of Caremerge, and I have a whole lifetime of learning compressed in like the past 7 years. I'm extremely excited about what the future holds ahead of me, and really have better clarity now around what role I'm going to play in forming that future over the next several years. I'm really looking forward to working with the rest of you in transforming healthcare. Thank you so much for your time.